Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating, almost structural way to look at our own minds. We're drawing from a piece called The Architecture of Resilience and Trait Anxiety. Think of it as a conceptual blueprint, one that basically strips our daily mental state right down to its absolute bare bones foundations.
So I want you to think about this for a second. What is the baseline weather of your mind? Like when you first wake up, before your inbox completely blows up, before someone cuts you off in traffic, before the daily grind even starts, what does your internal climate actually feel like? Is it, calm and clear? Or is there this sort of low-level static just buzzing in the background? Honestly, reflecting on this personal baseline is absolutely crucial. It's the first real step to understanding our own mental blueprint.
Section 1. The Mental Blueprint. Let's take a look at how this mental architecture is actually laid out.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the mind not just as a, biological organ, but as an actual physical structure. And hey, any piece of architecture has to deal with two fundamental realities, right? You've got the external environmental forces pushing against it and the internal strength of its own walls holding it up. The source material breaks this down into two very distinct pillars, those forces pushing against us on the outside and the structural integrity we've got to actively construct on the inside.
Moving on to Section 2, Defining Trait Anxiety. This is where we look at the environmental challenge. All right, let's focus first on that environmental challenge, that internal weather that's constantly beating against our walls. The text introduces this foundational concept called trait anxiety. Now, in this whole architectural metaphor we're using, we're not talking about an acute panic attack. We're talking about the baseline challenge that we all uniquely have to face. It's basically the inescapable atmospheric pressure of our individual minds. You can think of it as that underlying hum that acts as our default operating system. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the source strictly defines trait anxiety. It calls it the intensity of anxiety we generally experience. Notice those two exact words right there, intensity and generally. We're not talking about what triggers us during some isolated extreme life event. No, this is entirely focused on our default state of being, day in and day out. So let's unpack that a little more. According to the text, trait anxiety really boils down to those two factors. First, the intensity. When you feel that baseline hum, is it vibrating at, say, a manageable level 2, or is it blaring at a super distracting level 7? Second, what we generally experience, meaning the frequency. Again, this isn't about the worst day of your life. It's about your typical run-of-the-mill Tuesday afternoon. Your personal trait anxiety is simply how strong that feeling is, multiplied by how often it's just hanging around.
So apply this precise definition to your own life for a minute. Is the intensity you generally experience more like a light breeze, or is it a heavy storm? If it's just a light breeze, your mental building isn't really taking much structural damage, maybe a loose shingle here or there, no big deal. But if your baseline is a heavy storm, that constant atmospheric pressure is absolutely going to wear down your walls over time.
Which brings us to Section 3, the resilience threshold. Time to shift gears into the active solution phase. If trait anxiety is that relentless weather we just talked about, then we need to become the energized architects of our own defense. The source provides this incredibly monumental directive. Build a resilience threshold. Just let the weight of that command echo for a second. Build a resilience threshold. Notice what it totally doesn't say. It doesn't say find a resilience threshold, and it definitely doesn't say hope for one. So the crucial point is that the word build implies action. It implies real effort and intentionality. This threshold, it isn't some genetic lottery ticket you just get to inherit. It is a level of structural integrity that you must purposefully create. It's the active, ongoing fortification of your mental walls so they can actually withstand whatever intensity of trait anxiety you generally experience. And this brilliantly illustrates the core dynamic at play here. On one hand, you have the environmental challenge of trait anxiety, the intensity we passively experience, just crashing against our internal structural solution on the other hand, which is the resilience threshold. This juxtaposition right here is literally the absolute essence of our mental architecture. Your strength has to be carefully, deliberately calibrated to withstand your specific pressure. So let's summarize the whole shebang. In the architecture of the mind, the fundamental challenge is trait anxiety. The necessary action we are commanded to take is to build. And the ultimate solution we're working toward is the resilience threshold. It's pretty straightforward. If your trait anxiety is high, your building process has to be equally, if not more, robust.
All of this brings us to one stark final question. How does your trait anxiety measure up against the resilience threshold you are building? Seriously, are your walls strong enough for your specific baseline weather, or are you just kind of sitting there hoping it doesn't rain? Understanding this dynamic is a total game changer. It empowers you to stop being a victim of your mental climate and start actually laying the bricks. Thanks for joining me for this breakdown. Keep learning and keep building.